It's Professor Yaden. Today we're going to be going over Psalms. But before we go over that, I know some of you all saw the email a few days ago, and some of you might be watching this in a few days. But I did want to go ahead and talk about the changes to the class. We'll no longer be meeting in person, so that means that we've got to change a few things. Obviously, you can't have a final exam in the same way, and your projects took quite a bit of research, so not going to be able to do those at home. So I'm changing those up right now. I'm going to be sending you a new syllabus hopefully by Friday this week. We'll still be going this week and next week, this Friday and next Friday, exactly the same for the next 2 weeks as I've already sent you. I'm going to send you a syllabus that'll start after that. So for pretty much the month of April, getting through that, what that's going to look like, and how we'll make sure we're working towards course objectives and how you're being evaluated. So that'll come here in the next few days. So be watching for that. But until then, right now, we're going to go over the book of Psalm. Again, this is like with I was telling you about the little Gideon Bibles that you find in the hotel. They always include the New Testament, Psalms, and Proverbs. So this is one of the more important books a lot of Christians, I think, consider of the Old Testament. Of course, all of it is important, but this one is used quite a bit. It's quoted quite a bit in the New Testament. And this is an overall popular book. It's the longest book in the Bible, and just got a lot of good stuff in there. So we're going to go over it real fast. I'm going to start with date and authorship. The fountainhead of the Psalms is King David. He's known as someone who wrote a lot of Psalms. A lot of people say he is the author of the book of Psalms. I don't know if that's quite right, just because the book of Psalms wasn't completely finished until the post-exilic period. And we know this because, for instance, there are some Psalms in there that say, by the waters of Babylon we wept. Israel hadn't been in Babylon at the time of King David. So even though he probably did author some of the Psalms, it was put together in its current form in a later form after they got past the exile and got back into the land. 73 of the 150 Psalms, though, are connected to David. This could mean that he authored them, or that they are, we might say, Davidic Psalms. So the problem here is that the preposition that in most translations, I think here has got a Psalm of David, right? That can mean of David, for David, by David, from David, to David. So it could be someone writing something to David, somebody would be writing in the manner of David, in the form of David, or it could be David himself. We don't know what those mean, but either way, they're closely connected. Just like a lot of wisdom, other wisdom is connected to Solomon, a lot of the Psalms are connected to David, right? So David was definitely a fountainhead. We have some that probably do go back to him, some later. They obviously say later on them. Connected to David, but they're put together by an unknown source after the exile, okay, in the form we have of 150. Now, when you're reading the Psalms, I think you need to know that there are three main types. I know the book list, I think 7. I'm going to do 3 to make this simpler on you. You're probably not going to be a Psalm scholar. I'm not a Psalm scholar, so I think unless you're wanting to study this long term, I think 3 is fine, right? I'm going to give you those 3. The first type is just what we've been talking about, is a wisdom psalm. This is just a psalm that gives some wisdom, right? Almost you might say, hey, this is a psalm that you'd hand to someone and say, hey, do this, go about this way. Psalm 1 is this way, right? So in the Common English Bible, they translate Psalm 1 this way. Truly happy person doesn't follow wicked advice, doesn't stand on the road of sinners, and doesn't sit with the disrespectful. Instead of doing those things, this person loves the Lord's instructions, and they recite God's instructions day and night. They are like a tree planted by streams of water, which bears fruit just as the right time and whose leaves don't fade. Whatever they do succeeds, right? This is just a psalm saying, hey, here's a way to live. Here's things to do. Here's how to go about things. And you'll see that this is a little different than the other ones. There's not a whole lot of these, but there are a few that I wanted to mention. The 2 most popular form, though, of psalms is what we might call praise and petition. One scholar called them please and thank you psalms, right? One psalm says, please help me. The other psalm says, thank you. We're going to start with those thank you psalms, the praise psalms. These sometimes are called hymns. Sometimes they're communal. It takes the voice of a whole community, a group of people doing this. Sometimes it's just one lone individual, right? It might be the voice of David praising God for God's goodness. Psalm 100 is one of my favorite psalms here. I'm reading this one out of the Book of Common Prayer because it's the one I know the best here. It says, be joyful in the Lord, all you lands. Serve the Lord with gladness and come before his presence with a song. Know this, the Lord himself is God. He himself has made us, and we are his. We are his people and the sheep of his pasture. Enter his gates thanksgiving and go into his courts with praise. Give thanks to him and call upon his name, for the Lord is good, his mercy is everlasting, and his faithfulness endures from age to age. And then Psalm 101, in a similar fashion, in a more personal way, says, I will sing of mercy and justice to you, O Lord. Will I sing praises? So you can see there one in third person, one in first person, one saying, God is so great, the other one saying, God, you are so great. But either way, they're praising God, right? They're just a simple praising God. Some of them, I think the book talks about historical psalms, and what those are, I think they're still praise psalms. They're praising God for what God has done throughout history. So these are thank psalms. Thank you, God. Praising God. That sort of stuff, the positive. On the other side is what we might call the petition psalms or the please God psalms. These are asking God for help in the simplest way, right? Psalm 86 says, Lord, listen closely and answer me, because I am poor and needy. Guard my life because I am faithful. Save your servant who trusts in you, my God. So they're reaching out, asking God for some help. Simple thing. Now, there's two types of petition psalms that are maybe a little more stronger and that you're going to run into that I think are interesting. And sometimes as Christians, we don't talk about a lot because they're a little uncomfortable. And the first one is a lament psalm. This would be Psalm 88. Psalm 88 is a psalm that says, God, I don't know where you're at. Why aren't you doing something? Things suck really, really bad. Can you please help me out? Pull this up real fast. Psalm 88 says, O Lord, my God, my Savior, by day and by night I cry to you. Let my prayer enter in your presence. Incline your ear to my lamentation, for I am full of trouble. My life is at the brink of the grave. I am counted among those who go down to the pit. I have become like one who has no strength, lost among the dead, like the slain who lie in the grave. It keeps going. It gets even stronger, right? He says, do you work wonders for the dead? Will those who have died stand up and give you thanks? Will your loving kindness be declared in the grave, your faithfulness in the land of destruction? He says, look, if you don't help me, I'm going to die. And then what can I do for you, God? This is a lamentation. They're crying out to God. The second one that is maybe even more uncomfortable for us, especially as moderns, is what we call imprecatory psalms. Imprecatory psalms are saying, God, go take them out. Go kick their you-know-what. Right? A lot of these come especially during the exile period. We know they come out of there, where they're just saying, God, take them out, right? Psalm 109, let me pull that up real fast for you. Psalm 109 is a famous one. Here, I think this was actually, you could have done this for your final project before it got canceled, was this one. But Psalm 109 says, Hold not your tongue, O God of my praise, for the mouth of the wicked, the mouth of the deceitful is opened against me. He says, goes on, he said, let his descendants be destroyed. Let his name be blotted out for the next generation. Let there no one to be show him kindness and none to pity his fatherless children. He says, look, God, they suck. Take them out. Now, this is hard for us, I think, as moderns, especially as we talked about people who are in pretty privileged positions, to understand why would there be a prayer like this to God? That seems dangerous. But you have to understand, these were written by people who had just watched their families be killed. They had watched their children be stolen, their parents be stolen, right? They're angry, and they should be, right? And so I think these psalms are ways to pour out their anger towards God. Instead of acting them out, even, we might say. Instead of acting out that anger towards people, it's praying them back to God, saying, take them out, help me. And then what you're doing is you're taking those people and putting them in God's power and God's grace. You say, God, you take care of them. I can't. Which I think is better than saying, you know what, I'm going to go kick their butt. God, you take care of it. And God will take care of it in God's perfect judgment, right? So you have to understand that these are written by people who have literally watched people kill their friends, their family, their children, their parents, all kinds of crazy stuff. And they're reaching out saying, God, please help us out. Take those people out. Give us back the power, okay? And so that's the book, the three types of Psalms that you'll want to remember. And those will have a question on your final about those. Now the structure, if you notice in the book of Psalms, there's 5 books. It's broken into 5 books. That is probably, we think, to connect it with the Torah, just like there's 5 books of the Torah. There's 5 books in the Psalms, so that number 5 there means that. Some people also speculate that the Psalms come from different periods in Israel's history. So, for instance, Book 1 harkens back to the reign of David. Book 4 is a lot about exile, right? There's a lot of talk about God as king in book 4. Why? Because they needed to say these psalms to remember that God was in control and not the Babylonians or the Persians, right? And then book 5, they say, is a celebration of return. There's a lot of celebration psalms in book 5 and a lot of talk about how much I love the law. Psalm 119, the longest one, says, I love the law so much. Why is that? Because they just come back into the land and they're celebrating what God had done for them. That's one thing. You don't necessarily need to know all that, but it's just an interesting thing as you're reading it to know. To end, we're just going to talk about its use now. This is what we call the prayer book of both Jews and Christians. Most people refer to it that. Some people originally referred to it as the prayer book of Second Temple Judaism. Now I think people refer to it as the prayer book for both Jew and Christian. If you're in a high church tradition, Catholic, Anglican, Episcopalian, you're going to probably be saying these psalms all the time during your church services. And so you do this. Now, why has it become that prayer book? One is it's beautiful pieces of poetry. These things are gorgeous, right? It's just beautiful language. The second piece is they're general enough to be used at any time. For instance, there's psalms about Jerusalem. I've never been to Jerusalem. I don't plan on going to Jerusalem anytime soon, obviously with the coronavirus. But when I talk about Jerusalem and read those psalms about missing it and longing to be back there, I think about times, right, that I long to be back in, where things have maybe gone bad and I want to be back. For instance, right now we might long to be able to get out of our house. That maybe it's just going to a park is our Jerusalem. And so it sort of captures those deep human emotions within it. So it's got these deep, beautiful poetry, but also these sort of general human emotions that it captures at the same time that it lets people take. Okay? And I'll say personally in my own life, right? I'm not sometimes the best person at prayer or anything like that, but the Psalms have captured me at different points in my life. I can think when I was young, we grew up very poor, and sometimes we didn't know if we would have enough money for the next month. Some things would be rough outside. We'd be hiding in our house for different reasons going on in the neighborhood. And I remember reaching out and reading Psalm 61 in the King James, right? It says, the waters are up to my neck. Pull me out, Lord. Pull me to the rock that is higher than I. Other times, right when I was moving a lot, I was moving a lot of different cities for a while. Psalm 100, the end of that really stuck out to me. You are faithful to every generation. From generation to generation, your faithful love lasts. Those different translations put it. And I could see, you know what? Even though I'm new here in this city, God has been faithful to people here. It captured that sort of deep emotion, that sort of that longing to connect with something bigger. Psalm 88, we talked about times of great distress. What's going on, God? We might even say now during this coronavirus outbreak, as I saw, tons of people died yesterday in Italy, and it might get worse here. God, where are you? What's going on? What are you doing? Imprecatory songs, right? You might think about people who are now taking advantage of others, right? These people stealing stuff, these people taking up hand sanitizer or spreading this disease when people could die. You might want to say, God, deal with them. They piss me off. Deal with them, right? So that could be a time. Psalm 23 is also during this difficult time, right? He leads me through the valley of the shadow of death, right? He comforts me. Just another psalm to take on during these times. Psalm 61, like I talked about earlier. Lead me to the rock is higher than I don't know what's going on. So these can be used in different parts of life. I would encourage you, if you are a religious person, take time during your prayers to use these. These are, they can really help. They've really helped my prayer life, I might say, if I get a little personal here. And I think that's the beautiful part of these, right? These psalms. They capture every human emotion and why they've become so important. They capture anger, pain, sadness, happiness, joy. Everything is captured in this book as prayers given back to God that we can then use. Okay, it keeps people coming back. So these are the Psalms, right? In a nutshell. They're used for prayer. They're the prayer book of the Israelites, and now I think Christians use them as their prayer book. Stuff to go back to God and talk to God with. Guys, I thank you, and keep staying safe. I hope that you're not going too crazy. I know cabin fever is starting to set in a little bit for me. Keep those posts coming. They've been great. I'll respond to a few of them here in the coming days, and I'll see y'all soon. Thanks. Bye.